Alright, welcome guys. Today we're going to talk about distance, midpoint, and equations of circles. So I'm going to start you off with some equations that you've learned from algebra and geometry. So we're going to start off as a review. So the first equation is your distance. If you remember, to find the distance of 2 points, you're going to use something called the distance formula, which is this great big ugly radical. You're going to do x2 minus x1 quantity squared plus y2 minus y1 quantity squared. Now, for those of you who noticed, isn't this the numerator for slope and this is the denominator for slope? So the distance formula and the slope formula are very similar, other than distance adds this radical. And we'll talk in class tomorrow about why. Alright, next I want to talk to you about midpoint. The midpoint is the point right smack in the middle of two other points. So think about if you got a 90 on a grade and a 100 on a quiz, and I wanted to average them together. I would add 90 plus 100 and divide by 2. You're going to do the same thing with your point. You're going to add your x coordinates together and divide by 2. And then you're going to add your y coordinates together and divide by 2. One thing to remember about midpoint is because it is a point, it's got to be in the parentheses, the ordered pair. Alrighty? And the last one is your circle formula. So this is the standard equation of a circle. X minus h quantity squared plus y minus k quantity squared equals r squared, where your center is at hk and r represents the radius. And this was a formula that you guys used in geometry. So we'll talk about all three of these formulas today. Ready? So let's jump into the first example, which is to find the distance between each set of points. So let's say I give you negative 1, 4, and then I give you 3, negative 2. So again, we're going back to the idea of using a formula. What I like to do when I use a formula is go ahead and write down the formula to start with. Now, I know some of you guys are not going to want to do this on homework tonight, and I'll show you what I would recommend you doing as the bare minimum. What I like to do for a bare minimum is draw the radical and kind of fill in what I would call the skeleton of the formula. So I need x2 and x1. So what's your x2 value? 3 minus your x1 value. Your x1 value is negative 1. Now I'm over to here. I need a y2 value. So look up to point 2. What's his y value? Negative 2. And what is point 1's y value? 4. And now we're going to go ahead and do some math. So this becomes 4 squared plus negative 6 squared. And I want to make sure that you guys keep them in the parentheses, because when you square negative 6, I believe you should get 36. So make sure if you're going to rely on the calculator that you type that in. And so this gives us the square root of 52. Now your book tonight is going to say give us that as a decimal. I do not want you to do that at all. I don't let my geometry kids do it, and you're advanced math, so we're going to go ahead and simplify this radical. So tonight in your work I want you to simplify radicals. So if you remember to simplify radical, we're going to do a prime factorization. So 52 is 2 times 26, and 26 is 2 times 13. So now this pair of 2's can leave the radical, and I get 2 square root of 13. And that's the answer I want. So tomorrow in class it's going to say round to the, and even tonight in homework it's going to say round to the nearest hundredth. Please leave it as a radical. Alrighty? Okay, let's try one more. Alright, for your second one, let's get just a little bit more difficult and introduce radicals. So 2 square roots of 3 and the square root of 6. And the other point is negative square roots of 3 and 5 square roots of 6. Okay, and I want the distance. So this time I think I'm just going to go ahead and write the skeleton. Now I'm ready to plug in. So I need my x values first. So hopefully you said the x sub 1 is negative square root of 3, or x sub 2 minus x sub 1, 2 square roots of 3. And now my y values are 5 square roots of 6 and the square root of 6. Now one thing that you can do if you're not that great with radicals is you can always think of radicals as kind of like variables. So if I had negative x minus 2x, you'd say I have negative 3x. So it's going to be the same thing here. If I have negative square root of 3 minus 2 square roots of 3, I get negative 3 square roots of 3 quantity squared, plus 5 square roots of 6 minus the square root of 6. If you need to, that would be like 5x minus x, which gives me 4 square roots of 6 squared. Now, you can either rely on your calculator for this, or you can just go ahead and try to do the math. I'm going to go ahead and do the math. So I'm going to take, let me come over here. So I do negative 3 square roots of 3 times negative 3 square roots of 3. So do you agree that negative 3 times negative 3 is 9, and the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is 3? So that gives me 27. Okay, let me do the same thing over here. So I have 4 square roots of 6 times 4 square roots of 6. 4 times 4 is 16. Square root of 6 times square root of 6 is 6. And now I do the math and get 96. Okay, and I keep going and I get 123. If you try to break 123 down, 3 goes into it 41 times, but 3 is prime and 41 is prime. So this is the most simplified radical that I have. Alrighty? So far so good. That was distance. Review of geometry. With a little kick in that I've introduced some radicals, which means we've kicked it up a little bit harder than you guys would have seen in geometry. Alrighty? Next, let's do a couple midpoints. Alright, midpoint should be much easier. So if you struggled a little bit with distance, the second example should be much easier. So find the midpoint for each set of points. And we're going to do 2 again in this example. Alright, so the first one, I've got negative 2/5 and 7/15 and 2/5 and 8/15. And then we're going to do a radical one. Alright, so my skeleton formula is the big set of parentheses, add, divide by 2, add, divide by 2. Alrighty? So, let's look at our first one is dealing with the x-coordinate. So I have negative 2/5 plus, I need his x-coordinate, which would be 2/5. Now I get y-coordinate. So his y-coordinate is 7/15, and the other guy's y-coordinate is 8/15. Now I'm going to try just to deal with fractions. If they are driving you insane, remember you can use your calculator if you need to. So negative 2/5 and 2/5 is 0. 7/15 and 8/15 is 15/15. And now I'm just going to clean this up. 0 divided by 2 is 0. And 15/15 is really 1 over 2. Right? 15/15 is a whole. And that's my answer. Okay? Alright, let's try a midpoint with radicals. And this radical is going to have a little bit of a trick to it. But I still think you're going to be able to follow along, and then we'll do a couple of circles and call it a day. Alright, so for our second one, we're going to have the square root of 50, negative 6, and the square root of 2, and 6. So when you go ahead and put it into your big thing, you have the square root of 50. Sorry, I didn't write my skeleton. So there should be a plus divide by 2, plus divide by 2. So now I get my x-coordinate. Square root of 50, square root of 2. Get your y-coordinate, negative 6 and 6. Now at first glance, it looks like you can't do anything because these are not the same radical. But maybe we can make him turn into something. So let's come over here to the side and see what the prime factorization of 50 is. So let's see, 50 I can divide 2 and 25, and 25 is 5 and 5. So do you see I have a pair of 5? So really I have 5 square roots of 2 plus a square root of 2 over 2. Now these do have that common radical, so I can go ahead and add them. Negative 6 plus 6 divided by 2. Alright, so go back to what we were doing before. What are 5 square roots of 2 plus a square root of 2? I'm hoping you got 6 square roots of 2 and 0. And now your last simplify is going to be 6 divided by 2 is 3. We don't divide this 2 into the radical, so he just stays. Just like if you had 6x over 2. You would just write that as 3x. Okay? And 0. And that's my answer. So we've done distance, we've done midpoint. So far so good? Hope so. Now let's tackle that circle formula. Example 3. Write the standard form for a circle with, in the first case, I'm going to give you a center of 5, negative 6, excuse me, and a radius of 10. And then the second time I'm going to give you a center at 0, 2, and a radius of the square root of 5. Alright, let's think about our general form of our circle. It's x minus something squared plus y minus something squared equals r squared. Let's pull everything in. What's your x value? 5. What's your y value? Negative 6. And what's your radius? 10. So now all I need to do is clean this up if I need to. So the first parenthesis looks good, x minus 5 squared. Y minus a negative 6 becomes y plus 6 squared. 10 squared is 100. Okay, guys, you do not have to show me both steps. I'm okay if you can come straight into here. The main thing to remember is that as your points come in, your x-coordinate and your y-coordinate, notice they change signs. So positive 5 became a negative, the negative 6 became a positive because of the formula, and then you just square your radius. Alright, so we're going to go ahead though, and I'm going to keep through the long way and write the skeleton. So what's your x-coordinate? 0. Your y-coordinate is 2, and your radius is the square root of 5. Now let's clean it up. Now, do you see that if it's x minus 0, can I just write that as x squared plus y minus 2 quantity squared equals, and what's the square root of 5 squared? I'm hoping you said 5, and you would be right. And we're done. Okay? Alright, last example of the day. Example 4. I'm going to give you the standard form. I want you to give me the center and the radius. Okay? Alright, here we go. Wrapping it up. Example 4. State the center and radius for each circle. Okay, I need a center and a radius. So remember, back in the other formula, what do you do with these points when I ask you for the center? You're going to change their sign. So a negative 3 becomes a 3. And what do you do when it doesn't have anything? It's a 0. And then what do you have to do with this number? Because remember, this represents r squared. So to get just radius, we're going to take the square root of that number. Alright, so you try this one. First I want the center, then I want the radius. So I'm hoping that for the center you gave negative 3, 2.4. Make sure your signs are right. And for the radius, remember this is r squared, so to get r you would take the square root of 16, which is 4. Okay? And that's it. That wraps it up for tonight. So I will see you guys in the morning and we'll do some practice with this. Have a great evening.